Hello. As a CollectionsIndex Plus user, you may have noted options to create parts and aspects in your object records. But what are they, and how can you take full advantage of these features? In this series of videos, we'll explore what parts and aspects do and how to use them in your records. In this first video, we'll summarize what parts and aspects are and look at some examples. I'm currently viewing an object record, so let's remind ourselves where we can see information on different parts and aspects. If you are using the full or default view of a record, the first section you see will always be parts, and it's here that all the parts of your objects are listed with its basic inventory level information. Up at the top, next to the Views box, we have a box that controls which aspect of an object we're looking at. By default, this will normally be set to Whole, but if there are multiple aspects of your object, you can use a drop-down list to view them there. Also note that in the Parts field, aspects are referenced. Now don't worry about this for now, we'll explain what this means later. So let's take a closer look at parts. The parts section of your record is effectively your inventory level information. But we recognise that some objects can have multiple separable parts. So you'll need one part as minimum. You can't have an object if you have no parts, but the parts field can repeat. So you can have one part, two parts, three parts, as many as you need to track your object effectively. And every single part can have its own inventory information. So you'll see here that this object is comprised of 3 plates as a single work of art. So each plate has a separate part in our record. We have 3 parts. They all have a similar accession number, but we've used the extension field to make sure each has a unique object number, as you can see there. And each one we can record an independent name, an independent part description, as you can see there, and an independent location. So, for example, we can see that 2 of these plates are short-term loan outs, but one, for whatever reason, is in our offsite storage. So we can track the location of all these parts independently. We'll also notice that when we're looking at an object with multiple parts, we do have a Switch to Parts option at the top. If we click this, we'll be taken to a search summary which shows all the parts in our object on a part-by-part basis. So we can view each of these as individual part records. Another thing we can do is go to the navigation menu, and if we click on the parts option, we can actually search across our object records on a part-by-part basis. So we can see all the parts, whether or not that's a single part object or a multiple part object broken down into many different records. So if I run a quick search there, you can see now we're seeing objects on a part-by-part basis. So here's a good example. This jar and lid here would ordinarily appear as one record, and the ashes, of course, as well. But we can see that they are now listed as 3 separate parts. And again, if we go down to here, we can see these 3 plates, and this is that single record we were looking at before, but now, of course, shown as parts. And again, this is particularly handy if you're perhaps looking at locations and things like that. If parts represent physically separable parts of our object that need separate inventory information, then aspects are components of an object that need separate cataloging information. So different aspects could relate to different parts, but equally they could just relate to areas of a single part object. Let's look at an example, in this case of a one-part item that could have multiple aspects. So we can see this vase here. Now all objects will have the whole aspect as a default, and wherever we see this aspect, it simply means that whatever cataloging information we see applies to the whole object. But of course, if we need to, we can create more specific aspects. So in reality, this vase and the whole thing was created by Rod Kelly, who's a silversmith. But let's pretend that Rod Kelly only made the form of our vase, and that 2 other artists took over, one decorating the outside and the other the inside. And aspects give us an effective way to document that. So as we can see, looking at our record, we have our parts section of our single part down here. Our aspect is set to whole. And as we scroll down, we'll see that all the other fields outside of the parts section remind us in brackets what aspect we are looking at. So this is a reminder that all this cataloguing information is applying to the whole aspect. So these colours apply to the whole aspect. Dimensions are applying to the whole aspect of this vase, and so on and so forth. And of course we have Rod Kelly down here as the maker of the whole aspect of the vase. But if we go back up and go to our aspect drop down, we can see that this item has multiple aspects. One has been created for the exterior of the vase and one created for the interior. So if we click on exterior and scroll down, we actually see a much shortened amount of cataloguing information because most of the catalogue information for this record has been associated with the whole vase, but we can see that catalogued against the exterior aspect, we have another object production person. We have Adam Smith in this case as an example as a contributor towards the exterior of the vase. And similarly, if we swap to interior, we can see we have a Simon Smith associated against the interior aspect, again as a contributor to its production. And we can even, when looking at aspects, click on Show Data for All, and that will show us all the information. And if we scroll down to production, we can see all of these different production people are listed, and it's reminding us in brackets which aspect they relate to. Join us for the next video where we'll look at how we create multi-part items.